RotoGrinders. Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. You're going to follow me on Twitter. And it's Thursday, December 28th. We'll be taking a look at the Thursday Night Football showdown slate, Jets versus Browns on DraftKings today. Hit that thumb button. You know how much I like those. Hit the thumbs up button on your first thing in the door. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Join with me. The man, it's 3 days past Christmas, and it looks like you still have your trees up and everything. You decided to record in front of that looks like a nice setup back there, right? Are the gifts still there also? I mean, did you not open up the gifts? I'm kind of looking back there, right? That's obviously a green screen, but I mean, people may look and go, "Oh, Will still has his Christmas setup." I mean, did you get some good gifts for Christmas?
Yeah, and look, my wife knows I'm not really a huge gifts person in terms of myself, because the way I feel about it, Blenders, I work hard all year. If I decide I want something or need something, I typically get it, whenever I need to get it. So I'm not, she didn't have to get me anything, and I'm still going to be in love with her no matter what. I don't need anything. But yeah, she got me a massage gun. That's something I talked about getting. And some more basketball shorts, because now that I'm kind of back coaching again, when you're coaching, you can never have enough like stuff to wear to practice. You know what I mean? So yeah, some stuff like that. She got me a Carolina Panthers, frame for my car, which I don't know if I actually want to put that on this season because we've been so bad. But nah, I don't care. I'm going to put it on there. But yeah, so those are some of the things, stuff like that. But it was good, and we actually do still have some gifts under our tree because my mother-in-law was out of town, so her gifts are there. My sister-in-law, my nephew, like they were out of town for Christmas, so we've got to get them their items. But yeah, other than that, the tree's still up at my house. My decorations are still up at my house. We'll start taking them down after the new year. I like to run the season all the way out. So thus I love this this green screen photograph here. I actually really like the holiday season. I'm hugely into it.
Well, the DFS gods has brought us a pretty maybe coal in the stockings for tonight's game, Jets versus Browns. 34.5 total, Will. 34.5 total. You see,
and the Browns might score all 34 points.
It could be. We already have a Showdown HQ up for premium members at RotoGrinders. We got initial projections up. We got SimLabs, right? SimLabs is now part of premium, so you could use that for this slate. We'll be adding some more NBA, FanDuel, MLB probably coming up for the new season. So if you want to use SimLabs,
I can't wait.
All of our projections and ownership and simulations, click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month. And then yeah, so I'm going to assume, because I'm looking at Q tags and stuff. I'm assuming that Amari Cooper's playing tonight, right?
That's my assumption. If he sits, this thing's going to get very interesting. But I'm hoping he play. I actually prefer him to play Blender because of the Njoku. But I really hope he plays.
Okay, is there anyone else that we're worried about? Alan Lazard, Abanikanda? Is that going to matter that much?
I mean, Israel maybe. I mean, because Israel got some touches last week. Lazard, I mean, come on. Lazard hasn't really been involved in this offense all season, so I'm not worried about him in the slightest.
Right, Marquise Goodwin is questionable. Does that matter?
No,
probably not.
Nope, not
so
at
looking
all.
Looking at this slate, I mean, obviously it's a low-scoring slate. So just from a macro standpoint, I always want to point this out, because especially if you're going to be running SimLabs and running simulations, remember the three levers of DFS are projection, correlation, and leverage, right? Leverage is the ownership component. Projection is the, obviously what are the higher ranges of outcomes? Obviously, probably quarterbacks are probably going to score the points than special teams guy that barely touches the ball, right? Projection to it. But the correlation dynamic is that in a single game, obviously players are correlated to each other. That's kind of why we stack, quarterback, wide receivers, and stuff like that in the main. But the correlation coefficient matters more when more points are scored. Okay. Yeah. So it's a much different scenario. If I explain this all the time, if Joe Flacco throws for 500 yards, right? I'm just using a very exaggerated example. Like the likelihood of like Amari Cooper and Njoku or Elijah Moore, like having a lot of points too, is very, very highly likely.
As we saw last week.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if Flacco let's say Flacco throws for only 120 yards. Using an extreme example. It's probably unlikely that Cooper and Njoku and Moore and these guys have a lot of points also. So, like, as Flacco gets more points, it gets exponentially higher and higher and higher and higher. So, in games that have high totals that end up being high-scoring games, if there's going to be 80 points scored in this game, correlation is going to matter more. If there's going to be less points scored in this game, correlation is going to matter less. Because let's just say on the extreme example, the game is 7-3. There's only one touchdown that gets scored in some field goal. Like the top scorer on the slate may only have 13 points. And there may be a whole bunch of people that have 6-7 points, and they could be virtually anyone. And the one dude that scored the touchdown, it could be Cedric Tillman, got one catch for 1 yard and one touchdown, and they're up. Right?
Yeah.
Unlikely that's going to happen if the game is 45-38. Where the guy, we see all the time where some $400 guy scores a touchdown on one catch and still doesn't end up being optimal because the game, there's 8 touchdowns get scored in the game. So who cares? He's sitting there with 6 points. It's just not enough raw points. He's still like the 14th highest scoring player on the slate, regardless that his salary is only $200, $400. But in a very low scoring game, raw points matters a lot more. The winner of the showdown slate, the optimal lineup, may only have 82 points. Yet on some other slates, you may need 187, right?
Yeah.
So in these low scoring games, I focus less on correlation and more so on finding the touchdowns, right? I don't necessarily care.
Or the field goals. Or the field goals.
Right. Well, obviously, the defenses and kickers are separate. But I'm just talking about skill position players, is that you still need raw points. So absolutely. I care about raw points and I care about touchdowns. So I'm not opposed to taking any player that when scoring a touchdown, they could be optimal, especially on a low-scoring game. So, like, if you wanted to play David Bell or Pierre Strong or Jason Brownlee or whoever on a low-scoring slate with a 34.5 total, these guys are absolutely viable. And you could play them over guys like Elijah Moore or Tyler Conklin or guys that don't accumulate as much. I'm not saying I would play it over like Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson or Amari Cooper or some of these other guys.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people will be focused on the condensed production elements of these two teams. But according to the team totals, I mean, you mentioned it, Will, before the show. Both the Blitz and the RG projections and our simulations have Joe Flacco as probably the most overowned player on the slate. It's the Jets defense. These are two very good defensive teams. This is why the total's so low. The Jets offense is awful, right? But they do have some standout athletes like Hall and Wilson. Yeah. And the Browns recently have been passing a lot. you think they're going to continue doing that? And I'm a slave to the Sims, Will. Right? I think they're smarter than us. The computers. They're smarter than us. I think this is a good opportunity, especially if so many more people have your attitude of this can't be right. Only 200 yards passing for Flacco as a mean. That doesn't seem right. They've been dropping back 40 plus times. Maybe this is the game where they don't. Maybe because the Jets, especially if they could beat the Jets easily, right? Why wouldn't they just run Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt and right? They just go down the field, kick some field goals, and then see if Trevor Siemian could actually beat them. And the Browns defense is better than the Jets defense, and I don't think Trevor Siemian's the one to beat him.
Yeah, listen. So, in a general sense, I agree. Here's my issue with, I guess, the Joe Flacco projection. And once again, like I told you, Blender, what I said before the show was, my football acumen is in conflict with what I'm seeing between Blitz and the RG projections, because one of the things I know about Joe Flacco, and here's why I'm afraid of it's really not me being afraid of his fantasy points as much as it is the yards. That's really what it is, because they throw the ball so much, and Joe Flacco's the way he plays the quarterback position. So if you watch Joe Flacco, like even if they can win this game easily, he's still going to take some shots. And that's where I'm in conflict. I actually, maybe he doesn't throw it 40 times this game. Maybe he throws it 32 times, reasonably, maybe. Because I do think they can be in control of this game. But the way Joe Flacco plays the quarterback position is what scares me. Like, for Joe Flacco to hit 200 yards, it's not that far for him.
What's his top line? Will, what is his over under currently on?
Yeah, he's around 230 ish most places, a range of 230 to 232, 233. Like that's kind of the range he's in.
Which is kind of low for as it is.
Right.
I mean he's been throwing for 300 plus yards. So
yeah. But if it was if our projection was 235-ish, I'd say okay. Like, yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is everybody's around 200, which is like, well, Joe could throw for 160 in the first half here. It depending on it if he takes the same type of shots. Like even we saw last week, they beat Houston pretty convincingly, and Joe was still taking shots like that. So that for me, like my football brain is like, well, God, this feels a little bit too low. It is going to be cold. I think by cold, I think it's going to be in the 40s. It is going to be clear, not too much wind, no snow, no rain, and that's where my football brain has me in conflict. I don't think he needs to throw it 40 plus times this game. I honestly think he ends at 35 or less, but the yards I think could be scary because I mean one big play for 60 yards. And he's already thrown for like 80, and now you're like, oh well,
Well, let me frame it this way, Will. It sounds like maybe you're less on board with taking the under 232 as a prop, but maybe you'll be more on board of not playing Joe Flacco at 10-6 on Showdown, because there's a difference between the yardage, like. Joe Flacco could throw for 240 yards and not have any touchdowns because they ran the ball in. Correct. And a 10-6 quarterback it doesn't make the optimal lineup. He's sitting there without a bonus. He's sitting there with what, 10 points, right? Maybe he has an interception, right? Maybe he's only sitting there with 8 to 10 points, and the Browns still score 2 or 3 touchdowns. It just is not through the air.
Yeah.
It seems like you would be more on board with not playing Flacco in Showdown than you would be to taking the under. I'm not sure how much you'd be taking the over. Just maybe you won't be betting the under 232.
Correct. That's really where I'm at. It's like Joe Flacco is, because to me, Blender, I feel like Joe Flacco is probably the most important piece of the slate tonight, based on how the field is going to treat all of his recent performances. Because even though we're not talking about it, like everybody knows, like, oh, Joe Flacco's just been lighting it up. Like it's everyone just you've been plugging him in. And last week's performance,
is this a revenge? Isn't this technically a revenge game?
Oh God, no! Come on.
Didn't he play for the Jets for a little bit?
He did. The Jets would probably love to have Joe Flacco in the building right now, but I don't think it's a revenge game. But and let me say this too, Blender, because I do have a Prize Picks video coming out, and Joe Flacco is in it. But Garrett Wilson is also in it, and I think if you're not playing Flacco, in my opinion, because of how I think this game is going to go, I think you need to have plenty of Garrett Wilson for what it's worth. Because I do think the Jets are going to be behind in this game. And if so, I mean, Garrett Wilson getting 10 to 15 targets, albeit some of them won't be great targets. I fully understand that. The volume alone, I think, makes him, for me, probably one of my top plays on the board, despite the fact that I think they're going to lose this game and be behind 75% of it.
Well, how about Breece Hall? We have Breece Hall as the highest raw point projected player on the slate. In comparison to Amari Cooper, who's 2 points lower than him at 200 more expensive. I mean, to me, like this is if we take a look at, I mean, obviously premium members have access to our Showdown HQ and our sim labs. I mean, we see here just on the construction, as far as what shows up most likely as like the top optimals are very focused on favorite, like heavy Browns, 5-1, 4-2 type of lineups. It's also a weird dynamic where our sims show that the Browns defense, even at 5,600, is actually under-owned when they're coming in at like 30+%. It seems as if the constructions that are being shown as the highest ROI in our simulations are ones where you're primarily playing one jet, like an expensive. You're playing Breece Hall, and then you're playing mid-range Browns, which means you're not playing Flacco or playing Cooper. That you're doing something more like this. Like I'll show on the screen. Like, and it could be a lineup where you're playing Breece Hall and the captain. Like, it could be one of those type of lineup. But I would think maybe you do something like Jerome Ford in the captain, or even the Browns defense in the captain. I mean, I saw a bunch of those lineups also.
I Blender, it's one of those slates where I already know people are going to be on the Browns defense tonight. Like, we already know that. Like, this is one of those slates where they're going to be in there. And you're probably getting Njoku and Ford, most likely.
Right. Well, that's exactly the point. You go down the middle, Njoku, Ford, you have 7,200, right? You could even play. I mean, you can play practically anyone you want at this point. We have the Browns. Yeah. I mean, even if you didn't want to play, that's why I said, like, to me, Ford in the captain. I do something like this because you don't need the salary if you're going down the middle. Yeah. Ford in the captain. Right, and then we put Browns in the flex. We have 6,500. I mean, this is nothing. I mean, we can play Flacco in this line. You could play Flacco in this lineup. You could play Garrett Wilson in this lineup.
And what I don't think we'll see is double Browns running back a ton. I don't think we'll see it a lot. But like on a slate like tonight, Blender, where here's the deal, right? Like if we tell ourselves a story that Joe Flacco kind of just doesn't get there, and the Browns running game takes off, then you may in fact need Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford, because they may both be scoring all the touchdowns. And while Kareem Hunt may not rush for 50, have 15 rushing attempts, if he has 10 rushing attempts for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns, well, trust me, I can assure you he's going to be optimal. Then Ford maybe has, 15 rushing attempts for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. Well, he's now optimal. And Joe Flacco hasn't done any. Well, when I say he hasn't done anything, I'm saying he hasn't, thrown for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's really what I mean. So for what it's worth, Blender, I do think Joe Flacco throws for 2 touchdowns tonight. For what, just based on his style of play, Joe Flacco's an old school gunslinger. I think the only way Joe Flacco dials it back, in my opinion, Blender, and this is what, like I said, folks, this is just me being honest about my conflicting reserve of projections versus how I think Joe Flacco plays position. If they're up 24-3 in the first half, Blender, then I absolutely think Joe Flacco will dial it back, or Stefanski will dial it back in the second half, and we'll see tons of Ford and Hunt. If the Jets put up any type of resistance, 17-10 at half, 21-14, something like that, then I think Flacco's going to blow through these numbers. So
let's take a look at this type of lineup here. I mean, Breece Hall and the captain, Njoku, Browns, Ford, Moore, Patterson. Like, I think the key.
Yeah.
But I think the key is on this slate, based on our simulations here at RotoGrinders, is like using a lot more of these guys, like Ford, Njoku, Moore, Browns, Hunt, Conklin, Patterson, Zerline, Jets defense. Even using Browns and Jets defense. Just instead of making the barbell lineups, and the barbell lineups are where, like, this would be a barbell lineup. You would be playing something like Amari Cooper and the captain.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have let me get rid of this. Flacco and Breece Hall. And now your remaining player salaries like 38.67. You play, you put in Kareem Hunt, and now you're going down. Now you're playing Riley Patterson, and then just finding, David Bell. Like these types of lineups. Like this is the 5-1 lineup. And if it's a low scoring slate, very low scoring slate, like I said before, I don't mind these cheaper guys in these types of lineups. It's just that our simulations are much more skewed towards the mid-range. That Flacco's overowned, Cooper's overowned. You'll see that in our Showdown HQ. If you're a premium member, I'll just give you a little preview here. You get this for all the Island Showdown games. And obviously we got playoffs coming up, right? And you also, we do this for like NBA and NFL and MLB. So this isn't just like, if you're a premium member, you're going to be getting this for other sports as well. But we go captain usage by player. Like our Sims, compared to ownership, have Breece Hall as positive leverage. Amari Cooper is pretty healthy negative leverage. And Joe Flacco is pretty healthy negative leverage, right? It actually prefers more of Hall, Njoku, and then a little bit of, kind of even around everywhere else. So, like, this is the information that you get here at RotoGrinders Premium, and all of this information is also reflected in SimLab. So, like, here it's kind of giving you a representation, player by player, construction by construction. But it'll also show, if you were to just, select your options for SimLabs and run 20 lineups, 5 lineups, 100 lineups, you would see that the higher ROI lineups, the higher rated lineups in our Sims would match those types of constructions. That's why I'm telling you about it, because I don't rely like Will on my football acumen. I rely on the computers to tell me what to do.
Well, Blender. Well, let's hold our horses here. Don't let Blender fool you guys. I'm all into all of these things. It's just, once again, Joe Flacco, the way it's really just about the way he plays the position, and so that's a hard decision I'm going to have to make. As we come down to it, and Blender, you know what I'm probably going to do? Most likely, I'm probably going to build some lineups, and I'll build some showdown lineups with Flacco, without Flacco, and then in the pick'em streets, prize picks, underdog, pick six, all those things, I'll probably build some hedges, Blender, and I'll accept the risk of what I'm doing. So, like, if I make a 5-pick or 6-pick, or 3-pick on underdog. Well, maybe not necessarily 3-pick on underdog, but 5-pick on let's say pick 6 as an example, or 6-pick on pick 6. I will run Joe Flacco over 230 and some under 230. But what I'll do is I'll take other props that I have a firm stance on. Do you get what I'm saying? So like if I feel like the field goal kickers are going to go over, I'll take them. I'll take Ford over rushing. I'll take Brees Hall over rushing. As an example, and then I'll say, okay, in this one I take him over 230.5. And the other one I take him under 230.5. And I understand that I understand that I'm trusting myself to say, hey, these other 5 have to be right. Like I fully understand what I'm doing. If I end up in this same type of a conundrum by the time the slate kicks off. Now, by the time the slate kicks off, Blender, I could just say, okay, I'm just going to roll with the projections, roll with what they're telling me, and just be in conflict and make all the money tonight. You know what I mean? So we'll see.
One thing I like about SimLabs, if you want to get context on the slate, I mean, this is very similar. I'm showing you like Showdown HQ is kind of like the content version of what SimLabs is. Like this is just showing you some output. But SimLabs gets you could create whatever you want. This SimLabs is essentially a front end for our backend system that creates, Slate IQ and Showdown HQ and all this type of stuff. But it could also show you like the simulated winning scores for the slate, how often these percentiles of what the winning score is going to be, and also what the cash line is going to be. And one, what I said before about high scoring slates, low scoring slates, how much correlation you need, how much you should prioritize that. You could just simply look at SimLabs for that of like, what is the percentile cash line, 75 to 81, and what is the highest percentile winning cash line, 95 to 104. The closer those things are together, the less that correlation is going to matter. When those things are further apart, then it's like in order to reach those ceiling outcomes, probably multiple players are attached to one another. So, and we also see very similar to the Showdown HQ here, optimal versus projected ownership, right? There's a little chart here, but it doesn't show you everyone. You can click this little box to get the list. And it'll show you based on, optimal percentage ownership in the this is for the captain spot and the difference between the two. So we have here the most under-owned captains linearly compared to our ownership. Obviously, if you think they're going to be twice as owned, obviously you got to adjust that. Are actually the kickers. The kickers and the captain are under-owned. Trevor Siemian is going to be under-owned in the captain spot. Elijah Moore, Kareem Hunt, under-owned in the captain spot. And over-owned would be on the bottom. Amari Cooper, Cleveland defense, Jerome Ford, Joe Flacco. Garrett Wilson, David, it seems like all the people that we were talking, like Njoku, Wilson, Flacco. But Hill, actually, Brees Hall, even though he's going to be the most owned captain, we have him as actually very slightly under-owned if this ownership is correct. And you could also click over to the flex and see the same exact thing. It seems like on this slate, and it makes sense that people are going to be scared to play Trevor Siemian against the Browns defense. And I don't need football acumen to know I'd probably be scared also. Right? I don't need to know the X's or O's to know that Trevor Siemian's probably not the answer for the Jets at quarterback. It's a 13.5 total. The Browns defense is number 1 in the league. I wouldn't be shocked if Zach Wilson finished this game like at any point. And dude, if Zach Wilson plays the second half, that may just mean it may even be worse for the Jets. I mean, like it's like that, like you said before, the Jets would probably prefer, if they cared about winning games, which they don't. They're not making the playoffs or anything, right?
Yeah.
I think they'd much rather steal Flacco from the other sideline and have him, like, this may be one of those games where the Jets would rather have, Will, I don't know if you played schoolyard football, right?
Yeah, of course.
Schoolyard football, right? When you're 12 years old and you have like someone be like the designated quarterback, right?
Yeah,
where you had an uneven amount of play. It was 9 kids, and it's like, well, you can't really play 5 on 4. So what you would either do, Will, it was one of these two things. And I'll tell you which one. You have to guess which one I was, because there was always 2 designated positions if there was an odd player out, if there was 9 people. either a designated quarterback, like someone that was just, their job was to be the quarterback of both sides, or the designated guy that covers the quarter, like that snaps the ball in, that covers you go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi before you can run.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a designated person for that.
Yeah.
I want you to guess which was the more likely position that I was.
Oh, for sure, the quarterback.
When I was 12.
For sure. The quarterback, but no doubt about it.
Couldn't be more further from the truth.
Yeah, but Blender knew I was going to say quarterback, by the way. I'm sure he knew I was going to say this. But yeah, Blender, that took me back, man. Those were good times, actually. Really good times.
And the thing was, I never got up to 7 Mississippi because I was too slow to actually we played 3-second hold instead of 2-hand touch. So that was just, there's no way I'm holding on to anyone for 3 seconds, especially when my friends at my early teens were like kids on like the baseball team. And like I was the nerdy kid that knew more about sports than anyone else. And that's why I was able to hang out with the nerdy jocks.
Right.
But
you just didn't play.
Yeah, but I was typically the referee or the designated stat taker or something that involves not being an athlete, whatever that is. That's what I did. I was the designated center fielder or whatever the hell that you don't have to rely on me for catching a ball or throwing a ball or hitting. I wasn't. The thing was that when I then hung out with the nerds, because I divided on those two lines. So like I either hung out with the jocks, right? Or I hung out with the nerds. Typically in my neighborhood, I hung out with the jocks, but typically in school, I hung out with the nerds. And then when the nerds go out into the schoolyard, I'm the athlete, right? I'm the only one that could throw a Frisbee straight, right? I'm the only one that could like, yeah, I can't throw the ball hard, but I could, if you'd show me a box on the wall, I could hit that wall. I could, as long as you're not throwing the ball at 80 miles an hour, I could probably hit it with a bat. I can play some tennis. I can play some volleyball. So like amongst the nerds, I was the jock, but amongst the jock, I was the designated snapper in schoolyard football.
Yeah. All good, man. All good.
You wouldn't, Ross. I would be a $200 player in schoolyard football.
Well, we need you for salary relief. We want to win.
But you're getting a 0. I'm Tony Snell. You'd see the stat line 0, 0, 0, 0.
That's okay. That's okay. You allowed us to get everybody else we wanted.
Right. You have to condense everything in. So outside the showdown slate.
Let me ask you just one question about the showdown.
Okay.
Because see now what I want to do is we're going to get into the mind of the course, the theory of DFS. If you haven't checked it out, go check out the course. Where is your line on a slate like today where you decide, you know what? Why didn't I just load up on the Jets and play one Brown? Because clearly the Browns are the better football team, right? And so I'm trying to because what I want people to understand is that we don't just do things just to do it, like just to be different. But where is your line where you say, okay, and maybe not even 5-1, maybe you say 4-2, Blender. You say, well, let's tell the story that the Jets somehow aren't bad today, and Simeon has to keep throwing, and Wilson and Hall, and you throw in Xavier Gibson, and then on the other side, maybe you have, Jerome Ford and let's just go to our double running back, Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. You have them, and then you play 4 Jets. Like, how close are you mentally to something like that today? Even though we know what our Sims are saying, like, where do you stand on that?
Well, I think I'm more likely to still use the mid-range type of stuff. I think people that play based on, obviously, on ownership and Sims, that if people are playing a Jet in their like Browns lineup, so they're playing either a 5-1 or a 4-2, they're most likely playing Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, right?
In which they should 1, 2, they absolutely should be.
Right. And then comes like the kickers and the defenses, maybe a little bit on Gibson. I just don't know about these cheap guys on the Jets and all. Like, my attitude is that the under-owned player is Semien. That if I were to play, like I wouldn't be looking to play a 4-2 Jets lineup. I'd just be looking to play non-Browns defense, Simeon, Wilson, Jets defense lineups, or Greg Zuerlein lineups, where if you're playing 3 Jets, but I'm not playing the cheap guys. But in those scenarios, I'm not playing the expense. I'm not playing Flacco or Cooper either. So, like, I still need raw points. And so I'd still be playing this range of, like, I consider Simeon can be in this range with Ford and Njoku, Moore, Browns, Hunt, Conklin, the kick, like this range, like here. I just don't want to be in the business of jamming in like all the expensive players up top and then playing some like $1,200 guy or $800 tight end.
Right.
I think that the total of this game is low enough where, yeah, maybe these guys get raw points, but I don't think that any of these guys up on the top, not any, but it's not going to be all of them. Like, I don't think it's going to be a slate where, like, Simeon up and Ford up or everyone, they all score like 18 plus points. And then it's like the only way to get 4 of them in your lineup is to play some cheap guy. And if the cheap guy scores 6, you're done. You're good. You won. I just don't think the differences in the scoring between like Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson will be that dramatic. Right.
I understand.
Or and insert Breece Hall, insert Amari Cooper. I'm not saying that no one up here gets there. I'm just saying that I don't think 5 of them, I don't think 4 of them all have 20 plus points.
Yeah, and let me
I just think that one of these mid-range guys scores enough points that from a salary adjusted perspective, Elijah Moore for 6,600 with 12 points is better than Amari Cooper at 11-2 with 16 points.
No,
you're not going to need Amari Cooper. You're going to need and none of these cheap guys are really going to get there. You can still leave money. And the thing is that you can still leave money on the table. Like, dude, I was showing some construction on the sidebar here where I'm still leaving like 3,000 on the table and still not having to play like Jason Brownlee or something. Like you could, like if you just didn't play Cooper or Flacco in the lineup, like you could kind of play whoever you want.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go and revisit something just to kind of, I guess, bring this part home. This is why, if you remember at the top of the show, folks, Blender was saying he kind of walked through leverage, projections, correlation, and when correlation is going to be, coming into play a lot more. And so if you're still keeping that in your mind, the idea on this slate, and I feel the same way, Blender, for what it's worth. Obviously, we don't think this is going to be a shootout. This isn't going to be a 35-28 game where both teams are, really pushing the ball down the field.
Well, the total says that.
Right.
Like it could be, but the likelihood is much lower based on the total.
Right. So with that being the case,
people I think are going to still build lineups. They're still building Flacco Cooper lineups as if the Browns are going to come out. And I know maybe Flacco throws for more than 232 yards, but I just think people are building lineups as if Flacco's going to come out and throw for 400 yards, and really the total doesn't suggest that.
Well, let me say this, Blender, and I do want to mention this as well. And this is the blitz right now. I can get access to our projections as well. I may do that, but right now the blitz has Flacco at 203. It has Trevor Siemian at 194, so it has them pretty close. Projections on the sites, Blender, have Flacco, like I said, in the 230s, and they have Simeon, I think, somewhere in the 170s. So why am I bringing this up, and how does it tie into what we're talking about for DFS? Essentially, the projections are telling us, and even if you look at the fantasy points projections, they're fairly close. They're about 2 points off, roughly. I think that's what it is. So what the projections are telling us is that for the almost $2,000 discount, like Trevor Siemian is going to be better than Flacco in this spot. And then if you tell yourself the story, Blender, like in terms of the correlation of those two quarterbacks, Flacco won't have to do much down the stretch, and Simeon will because they should be behind. So Simeon's going to have to keep passing during this game.
He's still in the game.
Right. Yeah, correct. While Flacco may be able to turn and hand the ball off for, 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. So if you think about it that way too, Blender and listeners, then what happens is you kind of end up telling yourself that, hey, I may not actually need Flacco to take this thing down. Now, once again, I've got to get over my internal, football knowledge and decide how I'm going to handle Flacco in the pick'em streets or in DFS. If I settle into the fact that I think the projections are wrong today and I think Flacco is going to light it up, then I'll build some different things. Let me just say this too, Blender. If I told myself the story that, yes, the game is low scoring, like the Browns scored 20, let's say the Browns scored 31 points and the Jets scored 10, which is very well within the cards, then if I say, well,
that's
I think
not low scoring, that's over the total, Will. That's not low scoring.
No, but my point is it's one-sided. Let's go one-sided.
Right, okay, one-sided. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still under the total. So 28-3. There.
Yeah,
let's
go with
under. It's still
28-3. Yeah. If I go 31-3, let's go 31 because total's 34.5, right?
So basically the underbetters got the hook. Overbetters got the hook. Right? Is that what they say? Because it's 34.5. 31-3. 31-3.
That
right?
sounds
Right.
way more likely.
Right there. I'm using the vernacular.
That sounds way more likely, and we could see this on SVP's bad beats. We could just see this. So anyway, if I told myself that story, essentially, Blender, Flacco, Cooper, and Njoku. I'm saying if Flacco goes over, or if he goes for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, you have to assume Cooper and Njoku more in some way. 2 of those 3 got there, and maybe all 3 for the slate. And then on the opposite side, I would assume that literally the only 2 guys that could get there at all would be Hall or Wilson, which is essentially what we're saying anyway. But at that point, I'd be playing no Simeon. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, basically, I'd say no Simeon.
They're only going to score 3. If Simeon doesn't throw for a touchdown, he's not going to be worth it at 8,800.
But what I'm saying is he could get the yards, no touchdown. Right. So now we're sitting here with Wilson with 8 catches for 80 yards, and you still need him, but maybe you don't need anybody else. Now, the difference is, and this is why Breece Hall's projection is so much better than everybody else's, just to kind of tell you that story behind the curtain. And I haven't looked at like the sausage, how they made the sausage. But my assumption is it's because he's got the rushing yards, but then he's also got 5 catches for 50 yards because of all the dump offs. And that's how the projection is kind of leading you to him being, one of the highest scorers. So if that's the case, Blender, then you probably could get away with 5-1 playing Hall or Wilson, 5-1 playing or 4-2 playing Browns with Flacco, maybe an Njoku captain because he's cheaper, or a Moore captain, and then you still got in those Jets. But anyway, that's just another way to look at it. If in your mind, in my mind, I say I think Flacco gets there, and I think the Jets are just so bad they do nothing.
So props wise on tonight's game, what do you can have an article, right? Prize picks, underdog.
So today is the video. So I do a video for Prize Picks for the Thursday night football slate. TJ may be writing something, but I do the audio video.
Any preview of the video? Preview before the video comes out?
Yeah. So I am taking Garrett Wilson more than 51.5 yards because I think they're going to be behind. His receptions, I think, are like 5, but I think the yards are best because you kind of have to play the game between some of these things. But I think the blitz that I project have them around 60, and I think they're going to have to throw the ball enough for him to get there. And this is also a guy, Blender, 1 catch and he could pick up 30 yards. 30, 40 yards. Like that's definitely in the card. So that's one of my favorites today. Garrett Wilson over receiving yards.
Okay, Wilson over 51.5.
Correct. More than
At
51
-110. At -1 whatever.
Correct.
So that'll come out. You also have stuff out for Sunday's main slate. We got a 13-game slate.
Yep.
You'll be on. We got NBA tonight, right? We got Grinders Live. We got Crunch Time. We got Jaylen Brown has been ruled out tonight. Does that matter for the Celtics? Tatum is available.
God.
It's NBA. You can't escape fucking injury news like 17 hours a day. So that's my reaction anytime I even consider playing NBA DFS or betting on NBA props. Is that there's no such thing as too early because there's no such thing as too late. And good luck, good luck betting on anything because no one tells the truth from an injury reporting standpoint.
Well, Blender, what I typically do, and I think I've kind of said this before, and we've talked about it, for NBA, I think optimally you need to get NBA early in the morning or way closer to lock. So if you don't get the stuff early in the morning that has like the 1 to 2 point value, so forth and so on, just forget about it. Like, don't even sweat it. And then about 30 minutes before lock, hour before lock, when the news starts coming out, you might miss a couple, but things have been adjusted throughout the day, and then you can start finding more value. And then Blender, if you're on pick 6 right now, and I know you're not on pick 6, pick 6 doesn't move their lines because of how the situation is set up. You're not playing against DraftKings. So see, that's one thing I think we've tried to explain to Prop Shop countless times. Folks, you're not playing against DraftKings. I'm actually competing against my good friend Blender. It's peer-to-peer. And so they're just going to give you the lines, and then you decide whether you want to play it or not because you're competing against each other. And,
Will, I have a question about pick 6.
Sure.
You have to.
Sure.
You're able to swap in pick 6, right?
Yes. And Blender, let me say, and I'm going to give you this straight because me and one of my good friends in the Prop Shop, Viper, mentioned this. Let's say, Blender, because Blender, the way I do things is I do spread out my exposure, but I also still utilize the prop scene almost like a tournament. If I find a line that I think is just astronomically off, like for instance, 2 nights ago they had Nick Richards at 14.5 points, rebounds, assists. Now, for those of you that don't know who Nick Richards is, he's the center for the Charlotte Hornets. Also, our starting center has been out for weeks. The line should have been Blender around 20 to 21.5. Our projections had him at around 22 to 23.5. The line was 14.5. Blender, you know what I did? I put it in everything.
You put that over in all your cards. I'm assuming you put that in all your pick 6 cards.
I mean, I had to. And guess what? Had he missed, no biggie, but because it was the right thing to do. However, what I will say is in pick 6, Blender, because of the payout structure and how it can fluctuate. So in pick 6, the other thing is there isn't a set payout structure like Prize Picks, Underdog, any of the other
because it depends on what picks everyone else has.
Correct. And
right.
It's
much more similar to DFS where
yes,
right, they're going to take out about 20% of the pool and they're going to pay out certain percentage to all the 6 out of 6ers, percentage out of all the 5 out of 5ers. I don't know if they pay for the 4 out of 6s, or something like that. And
but the thing is that they don't do push lines, so you're always going to win or lose, and they have to do it that way because the contests are set up for 6 out of 6 groups, 5 pick groups, 4 pick.
Right. So whatever. A push is a loss. A push or a DNP is a loss. A DNP would be a loss also.
Correct. But they'll never have a push because every line is going to have the 0.5. So it's never going to be
a push. Right.
Right.
But the point that I was making, Will, on two regards, is that like for pick 6, the lines don't move. There's no ad. If you're sitting here going, of course, I don't have access to pick 6 yet here in Kentucky, but like, if I was going to put anything in now, it would just be a dummy thing. Like the lines don't move. It's not like regular sports betting where like like that Nick Richards line, by the time the game starts, has already been bumped up by 4 PRA. And it's like, I got it at over 13.5, and now it's at 17.5. It's like, no, it's just going to stay at 13.5. So there's no incentive for earliness that essentially you should be making whatever your 6 picks are going to be similar to DFS, like right before the slate. And you could even obviously look to see what the lines are currently at and see where they've been moved. Because just like salaries in DFS, they're not going to change. But the second point, Will, is that so to me, like pick 6 is something you do more during your DFS time than in your sports betting time, unless you're just entering whatever pick 6 contests are available. But the second thing is even more important, is that depending on how many people, like let's say you're going, Will, right? This is the type of thing that if you have the theory of DFS, my course, theoryofdfs.com, you would understand all of this. That's kind of the point of the course, of like, how do these games work? What is game theory? And any game that comes out that is related to daily fantasy sports, you should be able to solve just as much as anything else, because the concepts apply across the board. So if there's, let's say it's an NBA slate where there's like 4 or 10 o'clock games, late games, and and you have 2 picks that are in those games, and you've already won 4 out of 4, like it may be the type of thing where, depending, like maybe one of those 2 picks, or you're riding 5 out of 6. You got 1 pick left, but it's the pick that everyone has, and it's all off. It's the one that was so obviously off that that a lot of the 5 out of 6s that you're competing against have that. Like, it may be more valuable to actually swap off that pick to something else that may not be as plus EV individually, but if you know that in your pool that it's very highly likely that like 70+% of the cards, 80% of the cards have this, whatever, it's Steph Curry under rebounds that is 2 rebounds off. Like, you win a lot, but calculate how much money do you win when you stay. And that 6 out of 6 may only pay like 17x or 14x or something like that on that given day, or even lower. And then you go, well, what happens if that fails? How much do I win? It's like a 5 out of 6 may only pay like 1.5x or something, really low. And then, but what happens if I pick something else and the other thing fails? Maybe you actually end up getting paid like 270x, because like there's so few people that have 6 out of 6s that you just win most of the pool, that it may actually be more advantageous at that point to swap. But I'm giving you an example.
Yeah.
These are the things that you should be thinking about, in the same way that you'd be thinking about an NBA DFS. You're third in a GPP, and how do I get to first, and who's blocking me, and all that type of stuff. I'm assuming the people that are playing pick 6 at this point aren't anywhere close to thinking about this type of stuff at all. And you get a lot of people that are just banging out pick 6 cards at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then not checking their cards at 7 and seeing if there are better things that are on the board that you'd rather have, because they already made their picks, and they're done.
Blender,
right? Just like imagine building an NBA DFS lineup at 1 in the afternoon, watching a million injury news come in, and then never changing your lineup at 7 o'clock before lock. To me, I view it the same way. Pick 6 is kind of the same way, right?
Let's talk about this, Blender. Like, because I know we got to close. This has been a good show, by the way. So, and here's where I was heading with this, Blender, in terms of how I feel about the lock button in pick 6. I'm gonna break this down. Let's say, Blender, I've put together on a daily today 15 different pick 6 combinations, but out of those 15, I may have 10 cards with 1 play left at the end of the night. And let's just say, Blender, hypothetically, I'm 5 out of 6 in every single card. Well, Blender, guess what? It's in my best interest to, let's say, take half of those. Let's say I got 10 left I've got 10 cards. I've got one player left, and I'm 5 out of 6 in all of those with one player left. Blender, it's in my best interest to literally split the remaining projection, even if it's amazing. Now with the Nick Richards, I didn't move it because it was just way off. But like let's say Jonas Valanciunas at 10.5 rebounds at the end of the night. I'm 5 out of 6 and everything. That's my last one left. Blender, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, wait a minute. I'm going to kill myself if I leave them all here. So I'm just going to go in and say, well, these 5 I'm going to take under, and these 5 I'm going to take over. Blender, I've just solidified the profits. Do you get what I'm saying? Because now I already know my outcome. I already know if I leave all of these the same, I'm guaranteed the 5 out of 6 payout in all 10. But now, if I flip these 50%, Blender, now I've guaranteed half of these 5 out of 6, and the other half I'm guaranteed 6 out of 6. And I know you haven't played Pick 6, but there's a wide range of outcomes and what the payout could be. And so taking advantage of the field is advantageous. I think the most I've done so far off the top of my head is somewhere near 120x. Well, wait a minute. I take that back. Let me calculate it. Let me calculate it. I don't want to lie to you. Sorry, it's 94.5x. That's the best I've done on a 6 out of 6. Just straight up. But you have to know going in on some days you may get 20x. Some days you may get 15x. I'm saying on a 6 out of 6. The other day you may get, I think the highest we've seen, Blender, is there was one, and I followed the contest. I looked at it, and then we'll close out. There was one person that got a 6 out of 6 out of that particular contest. The payout was 10.5.
Right.
On a $25 entry. 10.5, because that was the only person that day. Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, so that's the upside of Pick 6. And so if you kind of understand that part of it, like, it can definitely help you, especially as you get down to close to the end of the night. Last night, it didn't work out for me, Blender, and I know everybody, and I know it's kind of a touchy subject in terms of the Brooklyn Nets players, but I posted some of these in the prop shop. Like, I took unders on the Brooklyn Nets players. On PRA and Cam Thomas 3.5 rebounds, which I take Cam Thomas under 3.5 rebounds daily. So this wasn't anything new, but I took up because you just kind of started seeing the writing on the wall. Wait a minute, all these guys are sitting, all these guys are sitting, and then it's like, wait a minute. And then you started hearing the rumblings, Blender. They want Bridges to play to keep his streak alive, but they were sitting all of the starters. So it was like, well, are they really going to run these guys into the ground? They had a big night before. And so it worked out, but Gary Trent didn't get 12.5. He didn't go over 12.5 points. So I ended up with 5 out of 6 here, 5 or 6 there, so forth and so on. But my point is, Blender, half the field was probably killed. Maybe even if it wasn't half, maybe it was 40% was killed because everybody just went to the Brooklyn players and took overs when the coach didn't intend to play them the whole game. So anyway, but that's my spiel on Pick 6, and I am enjoying it. And man, we had a long show today, but I super enjoyed the show, Blender. I thought this is a good one, very informative, hopefully for the people.
Well, we'll be talking more about DraftKings Pick 6 in the coming months, especially once NFL is over and it doesn't, everyone want NFL content. What's going on with the upcoming slates, showdown slates, main slates, right? Tomorrow, Kyle Murray will be on. We'll be talking about Week 17 GPP strategy for this 13-game slate on Sunday. Then we got one more week of regular season, then playoffs. We'll still talk about the playoffs, right? And then we're back into the groove of NBA and NHL. MLB will be back in April. So join us. Join us in the Discord. Chief has the prop shop. That's free. RotoGrinders.com/Discord. Join him there. Ask him questions about Pick 6. Once they get into Kentucky, I'll be looking definitely more into it because, peer-to-peer, that's more of my specialty necessarily than, it's kind of boring to okay, after the show, I'm going to bang out 100 bets for, this amount and, get an 8% ROI. And there's not much I could tell you about. It's kind of sports betting is kind of boring. right? After a while, I want to play against other people. And also, when you play against other people, typically they're better edges, right? So once I
Yeah.
get my hands on some pick six stuff, we could talk more about that. We'll have his prize picks and underdog video out today. We have tons of content, obviously, coming out for the NFL slate. We got NHL tonight. Also, there's a 4-game slate. We got MMA won't be back until next month. PGA
So disappointed.
stuff.
I've been loving MMA, by the way, man.
Well, they'll be back. Well, they'll be back. They go on a month break. They'll be back, some pay-per-view cards. So join us here at RotoGrinders. Get all of our premium content, including Sim Labs, which you can use for tonight's slate. Hit that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. It includes the props and pick 'em package as well. So if you want our projections and to use them to sports bet, that's it. Everything's included. It's all you can eat. All you can eat here. And all you can eat Monday through Friday. With me, all you can eat with me, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern. Talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props and pick 'em on RotoGrinders today.